Welcome to the Classroom Café, where it's all about brewing the conversation between fellow educators. This special presentation is brought to you by the United Federation of Teachers and the union's Member Assistance Program. Thank you for joining us today. We hope this podcast inspires you, nourishes you, and motivates you. Now let's get started. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Classroom Cafe podcast. I'm Selma Williams, your host and mental health manager here at the UFT's Member Assistance Program. As usual, we're joined by our co-host, Janice Acosta.
Hi, I'm Janice Acosta, Clinical Coordinator and Substance Use Associate at the UFT Member Assistance Program.
And today we also have a special guest. We have Norby Ferrero, who is the Clinical Director for Hello Hero. Norby, take a minute and introduce yourself.
Hello, thank you. I appreciate you guys having me here today. And yes, my name is Norby Ferrero. I'm the Clinical Director for Hello Hero Community Services. I'm also a licensed professional counselor and certified play therapist. So I've been in the mental health field for many, many years, and helping people is my passion and what we love to do. So I appreciate you having me here. Thank you.
So today, Norby is joining us for a very special episode of the Classroom Cafe podcast. We thought it was appropriate to launch this podcast as we're coming back into the new year, as we're looking at the year ahead, and we really want to focus on the exhausted educator and burnout. This time of year, we're halfway through the school year, right? Burnout is something that we can all relate to, and we all know and feel and understand. And today, Norby's joining us to talk about ways that we can nurture ourselves and combat burnout. So Norby, tell us, what is the exhausted educator? What does that look like?
Sure, yeah. So, burnout, the exhausted educator, you definitely hear this, like you mentioned, once we go through the initial hump of the winter and now the holidays are over, everybody is getting those credit card bills for all of the bills, all the gifts that they bought.
Oh no.
We're still in the cold weather. Summer seems like a really long time away. So all of these things add on, but the biggest thing with burnout is related to work. And so obviously as educators and being exhausted with all the work, this is exactly how it relates. So burnout is actually a state of emotional, mental, and then sometimes physical exhaustion that's brought by prolonged or repeated stress at work. So I know we all have stressful lives. We have stressful jobs. We are in professions where we're helping the public, we're working with kids, we're working with parents. And so that can, has stress just by itself. But when you have that repeated stress and you're unable to adequately manage, which is the kind of the key word here, then this is when you start to get to burnout. Another word for burnout, depending on the field that you're in or your specific job, is also compassion fatigue, especially if you're working with a lot of kids, maybe in inner city or special education. If you're dealing with special populations where you require a lot of empathy and compassion in your day-to-day, you can definitely get to that compassion fatigue. So that's kind of the definition of burnout and how it can relate to somebody specifically working in education.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And I love that you also introduced compassion fatigue, because that is right. We're all clinicians here. But the educators that are in the school, sometimes they're also clinicians too, but also relating it to even our teachers, our paras, our other title educators who, work with especially difficult populations, and may not acknowledge it or see it as burnout, but maybe compassion fatigue is something that sticks more.
Oh, absolutely. You don't have to be a therapist or a clinician to experience compassion fatigue. And truly, even you don't even have to work with special needs or with a special population. Just if part of your job as a teacher, right? You're giving a lot more than just doing this day-to-day building a machine type of work, because you're dealing with humans. Anytime you have any job in the human services field, you can definitely feel compassion fatigue.
Yeah. And I think it's something to really check in with regularly. So how would someone go about doing that? How do we recognize the signs? How do we know that this thing is coming? Or how can we recognize it? What are the symptoms?
Sure. So, burnout, compassion fatigue, all of these major points start slowly. They start with some small symptoms that kind of peek their head, right? And it's different for everybody. Some people will experience just one or two. Some people will experience all of them, and at different levels. So the most common symptoms include anxiety, sleep, or energy issues. So all of a sudden you're just having a really hard time sleeping at night, or you are just wanting to sleep a lot, or you get to the weekend and you're off work and all you want to do is sleep. You're starting to have a lot of energy problems during the day, just really not feeling like, it doesn't matter how much coffee you drink or how much sleep you get at night, you're always tired. So those are some of the major signs of burnout. And then on more of a emotional side, you start having a lack of creativity. So all of a sudden, that passion that you had for your job, what made you want to become an educator in the first place, or to, become a, if you're a counselor or whatever your helping profession is, you don't have that feeling of purpose anymore. And it starts feeling more like a chore to get up and go to work every day. And then a little bit more further down the line, you have what we call anhedonia, which is just the inability to feel pleasure. So that starts translating over to your home life. So no longer are you not interested in being creative or feeling purposeful at work, but you start having that at home too, where it's just like, you don't really feel like doing anything anymore. All you want to do is just sleep or stay home. And you kind of get into this emotional numbness type of state. And then last but not least, once you're in that point and you've been in that point for a while, you kind of start having a cynical outlook. And I don't know if you've ever worked with someone who has reached this point of burnout, but it doesn't matter what's happening day to day. They always seem to have a negative attitude or a bad outlook.
Oh, yeah.
Any small positive there's always a glass half empty approach. And then this also starts to translate to your personal life. And ultimately people start isolating because, nobody wants to be around someone. And then nobody also in that mindset wants to be around people. And this is when you start getting to more of the clinical issues of people going into depression. Their anxiety turns into maybe something a little bit more serious. And then that's when you start to have the need for more clinical interventions. But those are some of the basic signs and how they progress when it comes to burnout.
That's a really great picture that you were able to paint of starting from I think sleep and fatigue and energy issues are things that we all experience at one point or another, right? But as symptoms of burnout or the feeling of burnout continues, right, then it can lead into these other things such as lack of creativity or lack of feeling of purpose, and then ultimately leading to having the cynical outlook. I think we all can identify at least one person in our lives, whether personally or professionally, that are maybe experiencing some of those more intense symptoms of burnout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's definitely progressive. So, if you yourself are in one of those stages, or you see somebody in one of those stages, it's pretty easy to pinpoint and see the progression of maybe where things started, whether it's at the beginning of the school year or when you first started the job, and then kind of where things are now and seeing where things could get to if nothing happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what are some ways we can avoid this? How do we combat this big bad burnout, compassion fatigue?
Yeah, so that's a good news, right? Is that, even if we have stressful jobs, even if we are in situations, whether It's for things that are in our control or outside of our control that could cause stress at the workplace. There are ways that we can combat it if it's already happening, and then later on also prevent it from happening again. So to start out, the very first thing that I always tell clients when it comes to burnout is we got to track your stress levels. A lot of people don't have that practice, and so they know they're stressed out, they know that they have a lot on their plate, but they don't take the time to actually sit down and track what is causing their stress. And so I love doing this exercise with people of having them literally on a sheet of paper, draw a pie graph, and that's going to be how many hours you have either in your week, in your day, however small you want to get. You can get that granular. And then you start to do a kind of a pie chart of all the different areas of your life that take up time. So if you're doing, let's say, a week, you have 80 hours that you're awake, that you're awake. And so then you take, I don't know how many hours you're doing for sleep, and then 40 hours for work. And then if you have kids, then how many hours you spend with your kids, house chores, and you start doing that pie graph of filling out every single space. And then at the end of that, you have a really great visual of where you're spending a lot of your time. And then a lot of time what happens when people do this exercise is they go, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough hours in the day. And that's where the stress comes in, because it's like, I have all of these responsibilities and demands, and there's literally no physical way for me to manage everything at once. And so that's when you're able to go through and identify, okay, so out of all the time that I have and all the different responsibilities, which ones are causing the highest stress? And is there any way to decrease any of those in my life? So those are two ways to begin tracking and identifying stressors. Now, once you have that and you realize, okay, a big part of this stress is coming from work, or there, I can't decrease the hours of work or the demand of work, then the next step would be to seek some support. And this can be from coworkers. Coworkers are great people because they're in the same shoes, right? They know what you're going through, and having sort of that same perspective. So from coworkers, obviously friends and people, loved ones like your family, and then also professional help, because sometimes it takes a little bit more than just having someone who is just willing to listen and let you vent. And that's where the professional care comes in.
So not to cut you there, I just wanted to talk about support a little bit more.
Sure.
And get a little bit deeper, because sometimes we have connections with other people that aren't necessarily supportive, right? So how do we recognize an appropriate supportive, whether that be coworker, friend, loved one, etc.?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, that is definitely something that we talk a lot about in therapy is being able to set appropriate boundaries with the appropriate people and choosing which are your healthy and which are your toxic relationships, because not because somebody is related to you, or not because somebody is, you've known them since you were 5 and they're family friends, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to be healthy people for you to open up to and to seek support. And so one of the things that I always like to tell clients in therapy and just in general is that when you're talking with this person, what do you come out with? When you have somebody who's supportive, it's almost like coming and getting your battery recharged. If every time you come and speak to this person, you leave feeling empty, or you leave feeling worse because you're being criticized, or because this person is just telling you what they would do, or because they're maybe judging you, and you're feeling worse than when you first came, that's not someone who's supportive, and it's not someone who's maybe appropriate for that conversation. So making sure that you are actually leaving feeling better than the way you came in is a nice way of knowing whether or not somebody's being supportive.
Nice.
Yeah.
So Aunt Sue, who's at the holiday function, or at dinner, who is always criticizing you might not be the person you go to when you're burnt out.
Exactly. And just like Aunt Sue, you also don't want to go to the person who is just going to encourage you and say, you should just quit,
Mm.
don't even worry about them. You should just quit, because same kind of situation is that it's about, how do you feel afterwards? Do you feel like you were validated? Do you feel like you actually got other points of view? Do you feel like you got maybe a different perspective? Or do you feel like somebody just either criticized you, judged you, and made you feel worse, like Aunt Sue, or somebody who was just like, don't even deal with the problem and just deny it altogether?
Or imposing their own opinion.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. So neither of those extremes are good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I think it's sometimes we get a little muddy when we think about familial relationships or close friends that we've had for a long time. So it's kind of good to highlight that, not every relationship is helpful in these situations.
Oh, yeah. And I think, traditionally, especially depending on your culture and your background, but the sense is that because you're family, the expectation is that you are going to be close with people and you are going to have them highly involved in your life. And more, we see people learning the difference between healthy and toxic relationships. And that's a topic for a whole other day. But, toxic relationships can be anything from family members and friends, and of course, romantic partners, but even work relationships too can be toxic. And so learning to differentiate those and having some good boundaries is another really important part when it comes to being able to seek support and avoid burnout. Because if you surround yourself with toxic relationships and you're already having additional stress at work, it's only going to perpetuate things.
Yeah. And just for some concrete examples, I think about co-teachers, right? Like often, educators are, working in a room with someone else who might also be on the brink or burnt out themselves. So I just want to, if you could, think about some concrete, like, boundaries setting things that can be done in a classroom where you're kind of forced, or you kind of you're contractually obligated to work with someone who may not even realize they're burnt out, or you as the person who is burnt out might need these boundaries for your own emotional well-being. What are some ways that we can gently set some boundaries in the specifically the classroom setting?
Sure. Yeah. So, and this happens a lot, even if it's not necessarily with teachers or with paras, but just in a lot of helping professions where you're forced to work with someone closely, and many times they are either already there completely burnt out, or they're pretty well on their way. And so how do you kind of keep yourself away from that and put some boundaries is a really great item to discuss. So the very first thing is, I like to do this exercise, and it's a little cheesy, so humor me for a minute. But if you put your arms in front of you and you make a circle, right, to where your hands touch, imagine that's kind of a hula hoop. Everything that's inside the hula hoop, you can control. Everything that's outside, you cannot. So what we focus on is what's inside that hula hoop. And so that means we got to start with you. If we can focus on getting you to be in a good place, and if you can focus on what you can do to keep yourself from burning out, everything from the outside is not going to be affecting you the way that it would if you're not taking care of what's inside the hula hoop. So the very first thing we talk about is self-care. And what does that mean? So sleep hygiene, exercise. If you're good with 6 hours of sleep, great. If you're like most people and you need about 8 hours of sleep, great. If you need more than that, great. Whatever it is for you, make sure that you are engaging in getting enough sleep, getting exercise. And I know exercise is one of those things that a lot of people, myself included, for many years thought, okay, that's really optional for when I get the time, if I can't do it. But there's so much research out there that has shown the benefits of exercise. And, not a lot of people know this, but a 15-minute brisk walk can have the same levels of dopamine and serotonin release if you do it at least 3 times a week as an antidepressant. The
Wow.
exact same.
Yeah.
So it is really important that you engage in exercise in a consistent basis, on a regular basis, so that you can get all of those benefits that you need to maintain yourself in a positive and a good mood and be able to combat the stress. And then further along, practice mindfulness. A lot of people are not familiar with mindfulness. It's becoming a little bit more popular and more common knowledge, but mindfulness is just basically learning to stay in the moment. And we live in such an overactive, overstimulating world that that's becoming harder and harder to do. So learning how to practice that mindfulness is another part that can help you stay centered. So if you focus on those things, your self-care, your exercise, your sleep hygiene, your mindfulness, and finding those people that are supportive, like we talked about, then it doesn't matter if this other person that you have to work with is burnt out or is close to burning out. They're not going to affect you the way that they would if you're not taking care of yourself. And you can maybe, hopefully, start to have an impact on them. So the boundaries kind of set themselves because your energy, your outlook is going to be so different. You're not going to want to engage in the negative talk that this other person's doing. You're not going to see things from a cynical outlook like they do. So they kind of naturally set themselves.
I love this. I love that the focus is on what we can control within ourselves and not on the chaos or the dysfunction in whatever the relationship is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So you talked about some ways that we can combat burnout, and you also mentioned therapy. So what are some ways that therapy can help with burnout?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start out with explaining what therapy is, because a lot of times people have a misconception of what therapy is, especially if they've never gone to therapy. So therapy, it basically is just a way for you to be able to get that extra support that you need when you're going through a difficult time. All that therapists are, and I know the three of us here are clinicians, but we're trained listeners, right? So we go to school to be able to learn how to, just like a musician learns how to read sheet music and play and be able to pick out different instruments in a piece. It's the exact same format, but with therapy. We listen, we're trained to pick out themes, we're trained to pick out different patterns, and then be able to maybe see, okay, here are some issues with the way that your thinking is happening. Those are called cognitive distortions. And so there's other things that we're trained to listen for, to then provide support in a safe space where you're going to feel comfortable sharing, and you're going to feel like someone actually and really cares, that's there listening to you. So that's what basically therapy is. Along the lines of that, I like to talk about what therapy is not, because sometimes there's also misconceptions on, okay, so if I go to therapy, I'm going to get there, I'm going to tell the therapist my problem, and they're going to tell me what to do. And that's not therapy. And if you go to a therapist and that happens, you need a different therapist. Therapists don't give advice, right? Our job is not to tell you what to do. Our job is to help you get to your own solution, because you're the expert on you. We are just there to be able to help you navigate and provide alternatives for maybe things that you haven't considered or haven't thought of before, and reach the best solution for you as the expert in your life. So that's a myth that I like to always talk about, is therapists do not give you advice. I know right now there's a lot of popularity around life coaches and kind of that trend. And a life coach does come and tell you, this is what you need to do, and here's your plan A, B, and C, and go do it. But they're not trained, licensed clinicians. And so make sure that if you are seeking any sort of therapy, it is a licensed professional. So that's one thing about therapy and what it's not. Another thing with therapy is people think therapy is only for someone who's lonely and doesn't have any friends or family, and they're just, for lack of a better word, a loner. So you literally don't have anybody else to talk about, so you go and get a therapist. Not at all. You go to therapy, it doesn't matter how many people you know, how many friends you have, because again, it's a safe space where you have a trained listener, somebody who's going to be completely objective and outside of your situation that can help with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple of other things that I talk about therapy is just, it's also not a place where you just come and whine and complain and then nothing ever really happens or gets fixed. I hear that a lot from people, like, why am I going to go to therapy? Talking about it isn't going to fix it, right? I'm sure you guys have probably heard that in the past too.
Yeah, of course.
And yeah, and it's definitely not that. It is a place for you to come and whine and complain if you need it, but that's not the entire therapeutic process. When you come to therapy, there is a time and space for that. There is, that opportunity, but the therapist is then going to also challenge you and is also going to provide alternatives and is also going to give you homework and is going to have you try different things and come back and report on it. So therapy is a lot more than just that.
It's a space to whine and complain, but not all the time. And there's constructive activities around it also.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. I know I hear, especially in, where we are based in New York City, a lot of people are like, oh, therapy's it's too expensive. Only people who are wealthy can afford it. What do you say to that?
Oh, yeah. And I think there's two deterrents, the main deterrents that I hear the most for people, really, regardless of where they're located. But one is that, it's too expensive. Only the rich can afford that. And two, it's for crazy people. So you either have to be crazy or rich, but not for me. So the first one on the only the rich can afford it, definitely not the case. We at Hello Hero bill, we're impaneled with your insurance. And so we bill the insurance and all you have to pay is the copays. But regardless of where you find therapy, if it's somebody that's outside of UFT, there's so many options out there that are affordable and there's so many programs. So expensive should not be a reason for people not to seek the support and the treatment that they need. You can find many, many, many ways to get around that. And then as for, therapy is just for crazy people, I think a big part of why we still have this misconception is because Hollywood has done a fantastic job putting that in our heads of, people going to therapy when they're losing their minds, literally. And you have the image of somebody laying down on a couch. And, I've had clients that would show up to my office and like, where do I lay down? I'm like, we don't do that anymore. So, I think it's been a misconception that we've been fighting quite a bit as a society, and I think the stigma has come down a bit. But no, just like you go to the doctor, just like you have checkups, you have this sense of normalcy of going to seek professional help when your body's not working properly, but we don't have the same for mental health. And it's like I tell people, you get a cold, right? You take some medicine at home, and if it gets worse, then you go get some antibiotics and get an x-ray to make sure that you don't have pneumonia. Exact same thing for your mental health. You started to have some anxiety and you started to feel like, okay, I'm starting to have some maybe panic attacks. You go to a professional and you do some therapy. And if needed, you can also have some medication to help. So definitely a stigma that we're working on getting rid of as a society.
Yeah.
Nice. And as someone who, might not have engaged in therapy before, are there some like treatment modalities that they should be looking out for, asking for, advocating for when, engaging in therapeutic services?
So there's lots of different types of therapies out there, and lots of different types of therapies for sure. But like I mentioned earlier, if you do go to seek therapy, make sure that you have somebody who's licensed. That's the key word, is to have a licensed professional. So here at Hello Hero, we have everybody who is a licensed professional, whether licensed mental health counselors or licensed clinical social workers. So that's the key, is to make sure that you're going to somebody who's licensed. And then of course, there's additional certifications if you want a specific type of treatment. So there's credentialed alcoholism and substance abuse counselors. There's, like myself, I'm a certified play therapist. There's certifications on all sorts of, music therapy and art therapy and drama therapy. There's lots of additional things that you can get on top of your license. So if that's something you're interested in seeking, then that would be the person you'd be looking for. But for types of therapy, so there's typically 6 or 7 main ones that are universally acknowledged. And those are typically behavioral therapy, where the focus is on changing your behaviors, cognitive therapy, where the focus is changing your thoughts. And then you have more of like psychoanalysis, psychodynamic, and that's more looking at the subconscious and what's underneath what is maybe creating those behaviors or those thoughts. Those are a little bit more longer term therapies. The first two are a little bit more short term and solution focused. So here's the problem, here's how we fix it. And then you have, integrative or holistic therapies, which include maybe non-traditional modes of therapy. So, medication assisted treatments or different types of, including mindfulness, including yoga, including other types of integrative approaches where it's not just your mental health, but nutrition comes into play and sleep comes into play and in a mix of many others. So if you don't know what you need, for Hello Hero, we have a process where you come in and you do an intake assessment, and that clinical intake assessment is a pretty lengthy conversation and questionnaire that you go through with the licensed professional that basically lets them know what you need. And so then they will make a recommendation or they will be able to know what is the best type of treatment for you and what's the best type of therapist for you. So that's always a good place to start. And then once you start going to therapy, if you feel like you're not getting what you need, you can always change therapists and you can always request to find somebody else, because the point of therapy is that you find someone that you do feel comfortable with, you build some rapport with, and that you feel like is making a difference.
Yeah, definitely. What you just talked about with the different types of therapy, I think most people, we were joking before about the people think that it's like, oh, you lay down on the couch, right? And that falls under more of like the psychoanalysis, the psychodynamics. So like tell me about your childhood. What were your parents like? Right. And that's a lot of people think that therapy, or, there's still that notion that that's what therapy is all about. It's all about the childhood, and it can be about that, but there's also so many other treatment modalities that are just as effective, if not more effective. And as you said, Norby, right, having someone that fits that modality. And if you don't know, right, Hello Hero does do a wonderful job with doing that assessment, helping you understand what it is that may work for you. And if when jumping into that modality or therapist, if it doesn't work, then, making that shift and that change, because at the end of the day, it's all about what you need and what support it is that you need.
Absolutely.
So Norby, I think this might be a great time to talk a little bit about Hello Hero and all the great things that you've been alluding to, throughout our session. But yeah, give us a little history.
Sure. Yeah. So Hello Hero has been offering mental health and behavioral health services to children in schools and to teachers and educators throughout many different states and programs for about 5 years. But this year we started to specifically focus and have a partnership with you guys at UFD and MAP services, which has been wonderful. And so we have a special program where we offer easy, quick, affordable therapy and medication management to all UFT members and dependents. So this is not just for you, it's for anybody who's under your insurance that's your dependent, where you can very, very quickly get connected and be seen by a licensed clinician who can teach you all those skills that you need, not just to combat burnout and prevent it, but work through a lot of different things. We offer individual, family, couples counseling, because mentioned children, teens. And then, of course, if you're also interested in medication management and talking to a psychiatric nurse practitioner about that to help support your process during therapy, that is also something that we provide. So we have a really great program where we don't have any wait list. If you call many places right now, most places have a wait list. That's been a trend we've seen after COVID. So we don't have a wait list. You get scheduled with the licensed clinician on average within 5 to 7 days from us getting the referral. And then we have extended service hours. So 7 days a week, Monday through Sunday, from 7 a.m. to 10:30 p.m., our therapists are working. So you can have many options for getting scheduled throughout the week or the weekend. And like I mentioned, we're in network with your insurance. So we bill them for the cost of the sessions, and then you only have to pay the copays.
And it's important to mention, and I think this is one of the reasons why we were so excited about this partnership with Hello Hero, is that the services that you provide are currently virtual. So it really makes it a lot easier to have that session that you need after a school day, on the weekend, and it's not too disruptive with your schedule, or even for your dependents as well, right? We're not having to schlep our kids to a therapist's office for a session. It's something that can happen in the comfort of your own home. And so that's as of right now, right? The services are virtual.
Yes, absolutely. So we do all telehealth right now. I think we do have plans next year to have some in-person therapies available, but right now it's all telehealth. And like you mentioned, the convenience, you can join from your phone, your laptop, or your tablet. So we have a very simple platform and process where you just log on to the session and see the therapist. And then afterwards, if you have any issues or concerns, you can message them virtually as well. So it makes it very easy to communicate.
Nice.
So when you say you're in network with our members' insurances, which insurances are those?
Yeah, so currently we are in network with Emblem Health, GHI or HIP, and then also Empire Blue Cross Blue Shield. So we're in the process of expanding our network and our paneling, and we will have more insurance companies added on later. But if we don't have the current insurance company that you have, we have the option of doing self-pay rates. And then, if those rates are not affordable enough, we do have a sliding scale fee. You can apply for that, and there's federal guidelines that would determine the percentage discount that you get on those rates, and then you would have discounted rates.
Wonderful. So we're really working to make it affordable for members to get the support that they need.
Absolutely. Yeah, we really, like I mentioned previously, we don't want the concept of it being too expensive to be a barrier to seek treatment and the support that you need, because we know the work that you guys are doing, working with the Department of Education, is so important, and you offer such great support to your students and to everybody that you work with in the district. So we want to be able to offer that support to you.
Yeah. So so Hello Hero is a service that's available to, I think, as you mentioned, UFT members and their dependents. To those people who are listening and who are UFT members or dependents, how can they get connected to Hello Hero?
Sure. So we have a dedicated liaison, our Hello Hero liaison number and email. And so you can contact them at 212-510-6366, or you can email hhreferral@uft.org. So either of those will go straight to the liaison, who will contact you and gather a little bit of information to process that referral.
Well, thank you so much, Norby, for joining us today. I think our members are going to be greatly impacted by the knowledge that you shared. And for those who are apprehensive or have never experienced therapy before, MAP is a great place to start. And we can also refer you or make that referral to Hello Hero as well.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. This has been a pleasure, and we love working with all of your members and dependents. All of our therapists are always, saying how amazing it is to have these clients come, and we love having them. So we look forward to continuing the partnership for many, many years.
Thank you so much, Norby.
Once again, thank you for joining us for this episode of the Classroom Café. If you are a UFT member, the Members Assistance Program can be reached at 212-701-9620 or at mapinfo@uft.org.